Hey everybody, welcome to Rough Stuff, the podcast where we have our comedian friends come in and tell their most embarrassing stories from childhood. I am your co-host, Bridgett Greenberg, and I once wore two different high-heeled shoes to a family wedding and didn't notice until I got there.
Jesus Christ.
Yep.
Well, I'm Sarah Griffith, and I thought the dish was called pasta azul for like the first 18 years of my life.
Oh, fun. And with us, so excited to have him back, our biggest being Michael Swaim.
Oh, boy. Wait, so that would be blue pasta? Pasta azul?
Yeah, I never ate the dish. And I mean, I ate Italian food when I was growing up, but it was not like, I'm not Italian. So under no circumstance would a waiter or somebody else been like, actually, you're an idiot.
Pronounce it correctly now.
I'm not saying fajoule is like a more accessible word, but azul means blue. So
No,
I
know
like
that. And I thought maybe this was like some kind of seaside dish.
A seaside pasta.
Like it was like, oh, this is from the part of Italy where there's water or something. I don't know.
The one part on that peninsula.
Great.
Well, several parts, I guess.
I'm embarrassed for you, so the show is serving its purpose. Hi, I'm Michael Swaim. I didn't think of an instant. I forgot that there's instant embarrassing. Oh, okay. I recently, and this is a first-time thing for me, watched an old video of mine that I felt embarrassed watching and wished I could take down. And that hasn't happened before.
Describe the video.
Oh, well, it's a series I'm very proud of, 8 Bits, but there was one episode where basically the joke of the episode is like what it's like to be in an escort mission. Does that, are you guys gamers? Does escort mission mean anything to you?
Well, I did
silence on our end.
I did produce the series for a little while, but
That's true.
pretty blindly.
But I'm like, that doesn't guarantee you know what that term means to a gamer.
I was in Greg's shoes for all of it.
Yeah.
Well, an escort mission is a mission in an action-adventure video game where you get a character who has no abilities and is really vulnerable, and you have to, like, walk them through an area full of enemies. And everyone always hates them, and for a while it was like, why are these in these games? So we did a sketch with Noelle Wells as the character you deal with in an escort mission, and Greg Burke as the protagonist, and myself as like the wounded dying man telling Greg you have to take the president's daughter Noelle to safety. And basically it's him rolling his eyes and going like, oh, let me guess, she can't shoot, she can't hide, blah blah blah. But we went in a direction where this is legitimately embarrassing, so I guess it's a good opportunity to apologize, but I feel bad talking about it. We directed Noelle to go in a direction of like, you're mentally handicapped. And if you watch the video, it's like conflating escort mission characters in video games maneuver so poorly, they may as well be mentally handicapped. Yeah. And now I'm like, we should not have said that. That's a bad joke. That's a joke you think of and go, that's a bad joke, and don't say it. you know?
What year was that? I feel like that was when people were trying to be edgy, but no one knew how to be appropriate.
I think in the life of comedians, it's a personal thing. Every comedian I know, it has to do with like however long it took your own empathy to mature. Like, you know, if you go back long enough, when I was 14, 15, 16, I would make jokes that I now would think are just cringy. But I thought they were funny because they were pushing the boundaries. Yeah. But that's because I lived in a fucking bubble and I didn't experience any of those things. So like a rape joke is funny when you're 14 and don't know anyone who's been a victim of sexual assault. The second you do know anyone, you're like, well, that's not funny.
You immediately play all those back, and it's horrifying. I think for Sarah and I, we were talking about this, I think with David Bell a little bit, that we came up, we were like young during a time when YouTube was just a thing. So it became very easy for teenagers to throw videos online and be real dumb about it. And there's definitely something of 14-year-old Bridgett out there being an asshole.
Yeah, or like what I always want to put in a box and bury away for the rest of my life is we found YouTube videos from like, do you guys know who Glozell is?
No.
Well, she's a black woman and she does like this kind of caricature of herself, which like you can fill in the blanks as how a bunch of white kids impersonating that is absolutely completely inappropriate. But at the time we were like, this is so funny. And like we did a lot of like copying those sorts of things from YouTube and like, oh yeah, it's just like a funny thing people are saying. And it's like, no, it's not. It's not. If it's funny maybe for her to be saying, but for you to be saying is racism, period.
Yeah. And it's a nuance that like I understand it takes time to come to, but yeah, as soon as you realize it, you're like, oh shit. We just were impersonating this thing because we thought it was really funny. We didn't know all the implications.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It's definitely like freshman year of college. It's like so stereotypical, but I took like a women's studies course right out of the gate. And there were so many things I was like learning in that class. And I was like, I am a racist and a bigot and I'm an ableist, which I didn't even think that was a thing, but I definitely am that. Like it was like the checklist of like, holy shit, I've been living this horrible, bad person life. Let me correct course right here and now.
Well, the important thing is... Sorry, go ahead.
No, well, I was just going to say, there is an age thing. It's like, when you see people on Twitter that are 45 and still haven't picked up that particular nuance, you're like, all right, at this point, you're trying not to understand this.
Or when you see
you
45
can't say that.
doing it. Oh.
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
the president.
It's a Trump. It's a Trump slam.
It's a Trump joke. Okay, cool. Nailed it. Yeah. Swaim, you have some stuff. You said you had more gossip for us from when you were
some hot Swaim goss.
Some hot Swaim tea. I don't love that.
Well, I realized because when I was LA local, I engineered these episodes, and it was delightful to just sit and listen to everyone's stories. And a through line seems to be that like theater kids are up to no good.
Oh my God. You guys are maniacs.
And I realized that holds for me too, because I have a degree, like my bachelor's degree is in theater, and I was a theater kid all through high school. And in fact, one of my proudest moments, to preface all this horrible shit I'm about to reveal.
No.
Yeah, we started off hot and just kidding.
Yeah. I gave a speech to the school board and a bunch of like gathered journalists and shit from our tiny town that ended up saving our drama program, which was going to be cut. So I'm like hardcore ride or die for the theater program should exist and theater is important.
Right.
And I realized that my sexual awakening as regards theater kids was the same as they all are, which is like, holy shit, theater kids are weirdly sexual and like over the top. And I started recovering like stories from deep within my repressed memory banks that I hadn't thought about in many, many years.
Yeah,
so I suggested we do another talk.
Yeah, it's was shocking to me to find this all out as someone who was like very not a part of all of that.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, the jocks are the cool kids, but you guys have stories that really blow mine out of the water. Mine are just kind of like, yeah, I broke my knee and everyone laughed at me.
No, it's so much more. I think any kind of time that you're in the arts, you are with horny people in a general sense. And then especially teenagers who pursue the arts, they are freaky because like band kids are also freaky. Dancers are their own kind of freaky. Yeah. Like everyone has their own level of freak. And I think I was a freak for sure, but I think what saved me sexually was that so many people in my theater program in high school were thankfully able to be out and like out gay young men in high school, which is a gift. I know not everybody has that opportunity. So like it was just slim pickings in terms of like how I could get my freak on. So,
or not.
So that just turned into a lot of like jokes about sex.
Yeah,
That's how I channeled that.
What I'm like talking to all you theater freaks.
And that's what we are, not kids, just we're freaks.
Just theater freaks.
Well, that's what I want to ask.
As I'm still bullying you all. Is that you guys were like encouraged to be more vulnerable than I think I ever was.
Yeah.
Not really pursuing the arts. So you guys feel like a lot more freer than I ever did and still have talking about sex and like explore. I get at a young age.
I feel so
was
bohemian
ready.
when you say that. Like, it's like, ooh.
Oh, I still get super uncomfortable talking about sex as I host this podcast.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I want to ask. Like, I'm assuming from movies and shit, the normal non-art kids version is going to parties you were invited to and like drinking and getting high and then fooling around, right? Is that right?
mean,
Is that accurate?
Yes.
Theater kids too, I think. Depends on where you went to school, but
Yeah,
I went
feel
to
like
school. I went to school in a very rural like town that's mostly known for like herding cattle. So and everyone lived many miles apart from each other on like a big parcel of land. So what's weird is there weren't parties like that. It was just like stone cold sober being weirdly sexual with each other.
That's so strange.
I wish in retrospect that there had been liquor to like excuse some of the things I'm about to tell you. But like, for example, one of the big stories that came to mind was we used to drive to, surrounding high schools to do like drama competitions. And sometimes it would be so far we would drive in a big bus at night to get there and sleep in a hotel and then do some kind of scene.
Oh, that sounds horny, just right from the description.
Yeah. Well, now I realize as an adult that the bus driver probably should not be allowed to do that job. I don't remember their name or I would call them out. But the thing is, when we were driving on like long, straight, rural stretches of highway, that we would play this game that the bus driver was in on where the bus driver would turn all the bus lights off. So at night, we're running stealth, so to speak. Like if another car was coming on with no headlights, we'd all be dead. That kind of deal. And while the lights were out, you were
mayhem.
Anyone was empowered. Nothing physical happened in this case. There's other stories I'll get to, but in this case, the game was like anyone could ask any question in the dark, and people would, even though no one was making them, answer honestly, which is a foolish thing to do.
Wow.
So like,
Wait, this sounds like kind of a fun drinking game for like adults. Get some friends together, turn the lights off, and then just like ask random questions.
but you can recognize each other's voices, Sarah.
Yeah, but there's something about when you don't have to make eye contact with the person. You know what I mean?
That's it. Yeah. So it'd all be like these deep confessions that you're like, it's dark, so it's fine. But as an adult looking back, my thought is, but I know who said it. I'll see you at school tomorrow. Why are we doing this?
I still have to look you in the eye. But I think that's what goes into what I was saying about being more open to being vulnerable than I think I ever was. Because I would have just not participating. I don't think anybody would have said anything.
Yeah.
We're
all
our
that's the
experiences
takeaway
in high school of being horny kids were like people got drunk at parties and stuff happened and then no one talked about it ever again. Or
no,
they were
theater,
dating.
you're talking about it all the time with the people who did it.
Yeah.
Just
exactly.
openly.
No.
Yeah.
This bus game was the opposite. It was like what was cool and what got you status was to admit the most vulnerable thing. Because it meant like you were open to, that's the culture, or at least that was the culture. And I would say other theater groups I've been in, that's kind of the culture is that, it's vulnerability is actually valued. So it would be like one-upping each other with the weirdest shit that we had ever thought or done. And I'm not going to blow up anyone else's spot, but I remember exactly what I said, and I will tell on myself.
Okay, let's turn the lights off.
Which was that, yes, everyone please turn the lights down. Now, someone asks, who in this bus have you thought about while you masturbated, right? And I had just read, I believe, an Ambrose Bierce quote, but there is a quote by a famous writer thinker, it might be Mencken, that's like, it's weird that, okay, so when you go through puberty, and I'm saying this from a male perspective, of course, but when I went through puberty, I was so horny all the time that it's like crazy in retrospect now. I'm thoroughly over that level of being interested in sex.
Yeah, it seems like a burden for men. Like, certainly women have that, but it's not debilitating.
Yeah.
That's what I didn't want to dismiss the idea that there can be super horny women, because of course there can be. But as myself, who happen to be a dude, I'll just say I am not the type of guy who's constantly looking for sex and that's always on his mind. But when I was 13 to 17, yes, like intrusively, I could only think about sex with everything that I'm looking at, inanimate or animate, like anything. So anyway, everyone said, like, you know, safe choices, like the agreed upon hot people in the class of like the cis opposite gender.
Yeah.
So
what power those people hold.
I thought I'd score some vulnerability points and was like, Jared. And they're like, what? And things were never the same between Jared and I, but I'm still very proud of like copping to that I'm somewhere in the middle of the bisexuality spectrum. And I was like, yeah, Jared, I've thought of you while I've jerked off. Is that a problem for you? And he's like, nah, it's okay, man. But it did change. But it did change things afterwards.
Yeah.
What a great response. Like, nah, man, it's cool. I get it.
It seems like that was handled as maturely as possible.
Yeah.
Not really, because it was true, but I really was only looking for points. Now I realize in retrospect, like, you know what I mean? I was thrust into this world where vulnerability was the capital. And I'm not trying to build myself up by being like, oh, I'm like semi-queer. Doesn't that make me cool in 2020?
And it wasn't a shock value thing either.
I was just trying to say it's true, but I was trying to say the thing that would like get me points in that, like, I remember very clearly that I briefly considered saying the bus driver, which was not true.
But I was like, been funny, honestly.
How vulnerable would that be?
Because that would be my immediate response in that game as a joke, which would be my only device since I didn't know how to handle vulnerability at all.
Nah, man, theater kids are nuts.
No, and I think there's also something to be said about being stuck in a place for a long period of time, especially when you're like tired or delirious or like you're just naturally vulnerable, like when you're like when you're tired or when you're hungry. And so like I do remember having a lot of sitting backstage during tech week, and we're like sitting backstage for like 90 minutes at a time going between, you know, 3 queues, as like tedious as that could be, and like having some very deep, intimate whisper conversations with the people that I was around about like sex, about like our bodies, and like, is it normal to do this, that, and the other? Like really just kind of like getting trapped into, which like the adult version of that now is like doing a bunch of drugs and being up at 5 a.m. and then just like saying the first thing that comes to mind. But for teenagers...
Is that the adult version?
Well, I mean, it's the fun version, I guess. It's my adult version. But like for teens, it was just, you know, you're learning about each other and yourself. And yeah, there was like a time that it was just kind of like, talk about whatever the fuck you want and really get in there.
Well, yeah, and there's also the compounding factor of it being a very rural town where almost every lot is just an empty lot full of weeds. Like, the town I went to high school in was rural enough that there was a drain pipe, like a storm drain pipe, near the school that was known for being where you all went to finger each other. Like, you go to that.
Ew.
Oh my God, that was not safe.
You go to, My point is, if you've had sex with anyone from Ramona High School, get checked. Get yourself checked.
Ew.
Because they probably got fingered in a storm drain at some point.
Oh my God. Isn't that how It Chapter 2 opens?
I think the book version, yeah.
Oh, definitely the book version.
Yeah, I feel like oddly, growing up in a big city
curbs a lot of that?
Curbs it, because everything you do is out in the open. And I also grew up in a community where everyone knew each other from way, way back. Like, if you made out with someone, or like did anything with anyone, your parents knew each other.
Oh, Jesus.
And there was
that
less
also
opportunity
a big
to like
hindrance for me being like afraid of my parents and them finding out stuff is like, oh, well, I'm going to have Friday night dinner with them. So I can't make out with this boy.
Yeah, that would
and you
definitely
can't like
suck.
you can't just turn any direction and walk 20 feet and you're in the woods.
Yeah.
That changes the dynamic of the teens.
Yeah,
in
there's
your
also
town.
something to be said
Yeah.
about safety. Like growing up in a big city, like I would not hang out by a storm drain, period. That just wouldn't be a safe place because either Houston, it is flooding, or there are some unsavory Pennywise characters over there that like, because like when I went to college, people were talking about getting drunk in a park or in the woods by their house. And I was like, people, you're going to be murdered. Like, are you insane? Also, where are you finding woods? It's my big city
What's weird
privilege.
is, I gotta say, from my perspective as a rural kid, Sarah, you know who kills most people? Other people. You know where they are? The city.
Well, true.
Like in the woods, you're safe from people.
Okay, but
which
tell
is
me
the
why every
biggest threat.
Deadline episode I watched starts with, it was a small community where kids fingered each other by a storm drain. Nobody could have expected this grisly murder. Like, yes, people are murdered in cities, but it's very normal shoot or stab murders.
We get weird with
world,
it.
I mean, that's when you're like in a box for a week and then taken across state lines and then whatever.
You know, grass is always darker on the other side.
Grass is darker on the other side.
I also think there's an innocence to it, though, in the sense that, like, I remember it's weird how kids who are figuring sex out have bizarre rules. Like, there were certain couples who, like, were allowed to do stuff with other people in the storm drain, but only the storm drain, because otherwise it would be cheating. You know what I mean?
Oh my God, I love this storm drain.
The storm drain is like the Northern California Vegas.
It was a big deal. That my first
Southern
sexual
California.
activity. Well, the first time I made out was at the baseball diamond, but my first like sexual activity was in the storm drain, and it was literally with a close friend and his girlfriend. And she was blowing him, and I like felt her vagina and asked questions about the shape and function of the vagina, and I had to keep my eyes closed and look out the storm drain the whole time, or it would have been cheating, and they would have broken up.
Well, we are
And I'm
describing a Stephen King book now.
I'm
like,
like,
literally.
kids don't know shit, man. It's crazy. Like we're just trying to figure it out, you guys, and we don't know. And
You know, there's a lot about that I actually do admire.
Yeah.
That she was like, listen, I will let you experiment with my body, but like, don't look at me. And it was consensual.
But I didn't take that as like, oh, I have to not look at you because it would be demeaning. We had like this idea of, well, they're soulmates, so no one can look at them. Or that will
It's
destroy
sacred
their
and
love.
protected.
Like it was the same naivete with which we assumed that they would be married for the rest of their lives because they were the couple in our group of friends that got together freshman year. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just, I actually can understand, if I'm being honest, why Stephen King thinks it's interesting to delve into like, it's weird that time where you're a kid and you don't understand sex, but at the same time, I don't get why he doesn't understand that it's creepy when you're 50 years old
Yes.
to put long child orgy scenes in your
Seriously.
book. It's a different
There's
time.
a line
Yeah.
of how
You know, every episode, I just feel more and more grateful that I lost my virginity in college and like I didn't get into anything sexual in high school. But I do remember you kind of talked about like the rules of sex that like couples would create when they were teens and stuff. And I'll never forget like when our friend, it was one of those people that were like the couple of the school. When they finally had sex, like she had lost her virginity to him and everything. We were asking like, so like, when did you decide that you guys were just going to go ahead and have sex? Because I think they were together for like almost a year at this point. Which now, if I knew someone who was together for almost a year and still hadn't had sex, I'd be like, so what are you doing? And she said something like, well, he had like 4 fingers in me, so he just kind of figured like, well, at this point, might as well. And I was like, that's so weird that, and it like clicked for me. I was like, it's bizarre that you would just let him finger you, but for some reason, sex was always like, we're not going to have sex. I don't know. It was like I would hear about those kind of things where it's like, that's an interesting compromise to make when really you could just have sex. I mean, you know.
That like a child mind would
But
come
you're
up
also
with.
kind
Yeah,
of like, because
agree.
I did think for a long time that I was going to lose my virginity on my wedding night. Like there was also like that. And I think maybe women suffer from this a little bit more, that like this whole like your virginity is sacred and it should happen at the right time, at the right moment, with the right guy. So it is kind of complicated because like on the one hand, you're becoming keen on the fact that like, oh, this isn't really all that sacred and important or whatever, but then you also kind of your childhood ideas of my body is a precious temple,
Right.
and
I just remember points, and this was like a little younger when I started like making out with guys but not going any further, and I just remember like making out with this one guy for like maybe 2 hours and nothing escalated because we were both so afraid to escalate anything. And I was just like, do I not like kissing? This is getting boring.
yeah.
Yeah, no, being 17 is like dry humping for 4.5 hours and then going like, all right, good night. And you're like, what the fuck was that?
Yeah. Just feeling so weird and awkward and like, do I not like sex? Because that sucked.
Yeah.
And being horrified about that. I also remember, like, similar to your bust thing, I think my playground. Since
What was your storm drain?
My storm drain was sleepaway camp, like a good Jewish girl.
Very nice.
And we would have to do hand checks on buses, and like if we were watching movies.
Oh, like go around and like show us your hand so we know you're not like jerking somebody off.
Exactly. Like the counselors would just yell hand check on a bus, and then like half of hand check was a big cock block. Growing up.
Yeah, it's all hand stuff that age, which actually takes me to the second of 3 stories I wanted to make sure I got out.
Great.
Which is that, well, first of all, side note, because of the bus talk, you made me remember that there was one kid who would always jerk off into a bush at any other campus we went to compete in a theater thing as an act of dominance.
Like a marking their territory?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he was just 16 and horny all the time, but whenever we would show up to be like, all right, we're competing in the Laverne countywide, short scene competition drama category, he'd be like, I got to jerk off into a bush real quick. I'll be back.
And his name was Jared Leto.
I won't give his name because he didn't choose for me to tell this story on this podcast.
No, of course. But was it, I don't know how much you know about his motivations on this. Was it a competitive thing? Was it a nerves thing? Or like a machismo thing?
All I can remember when I look back on it is that he seemed to think it made him cool in our eyes. And it kind of did.
Well, yeah, because we all laughed and like cheered him on, I'm sure. I mean, I think at that age, I'd be like, yeah, man, that's so cool.
That's what I think is the theater kids had. It's like, being in theater sort of pre-sorted for the kids who had been raised to believe, or for whatever reason believed, that being honest is cool. And not every subculture, like that's not the thing to do in every subculture. But I think the reason theater kids get weird a lot is if you really fall in love with the craft of acting, it is about, and especially when you're a teen, you fall in love with like the method and all this shit. That's like, it's about being honest. It's about being vulnerable. Yes, we're not the popular kids. We're the kids who are real. And like, he thought it was cool to admit to us that he was going to go jerk off right now. And I got to be honest, we all thought it was cool too.
Yeah.
So like, it is cool. That's how cool this works.
Yeah. Well, I also got into this conversation. So I don't know if I've established this on the show as like Sarah Griffith lore, but I went to a Jesuit university in the Midwest. And so the culture there was like very Irish Catholic kids who went to Irish Catholic private schools their whole life, didn't know anything else. And I remember getting a conversation with someone who was talking about his high school doing Les Mis. And he was like, I don't think high school kids should do that play or anything like Rent or anything like that. Like you're having teenage girls roll around acting like sex workers, like their parents want to see that, whatever. And on the one hand, I kind of get it because sometimes schools do rent without understanding that, like, this is about the HIV/AIDS crisis.
Yeah.
And like,
oh my God,
sometimes
dude.
they don't understand that aspect. But what I argued back was like, so much of theater, which is about life, ultimately plays and musicals both are just reflections of life. They are like, this is a part of life, and like sex and relationships come up all the time in plays, in musicals, in anything that someone who's studying theater would have to come across. So like, it's almost natural that like that would reflect in real life as well, because when you're talking about these sexual relationships in like scenes and rehearsal in class, like, yeah, that's going to bleed over into your real life. To me, it checks out in a way that I could even defend.
All right. Counterpoint. We did Closer in high school, the play Closer. And of the two female leads, both got pregnant, one got an abortion, and one dropped out of school. And I mean pregnant by their counterparts in the play Closer. So
okay, but is that the play's fault?
No, it's I don't know. I don't know whose fault it is, because I'm like, I wish those people had been armed with more information.
Yeah, very
but
true.
Does that mean kids can't do the play Closer? I don't know. But it's a thing. It happened. I'm just letting you know.
Yeah. I mean, definitely different strokes for different schools.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a level of conversation that doesn't happen around these things, because you do get ideas from movies and
Yes.
TV and plays.
Well, that's what all I'm saying is that if you put horny kids in the play Closer, they're going to have actual sex after rehearsal. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. That's
actually with the Samuel French playbook. Like when you get it in the front, it's like, this is who was the original cast. This is where it played. Also, disclaimer, people will get pregnant if they do this show, period.
Samuel French's warning, yeah. But yeah, so that takes me nicely to the story I wanted to tell, which is along the same lines, but with fewer consequences, which is great for me. There was a young woman who was obviously like hitting puberty hard, super horny all the time, always very sexy at making sexual innuendo. I mean, I don't know, could be of going through something, but I like to think she was just very empowered and felt horny. Sure. So we'll assume that, because I don't know the reality. But she knew that I still had a lot of guilt around sex and felt weird about it. So she would constantly try and make, like architect. I don't think she actually liked me, like wanted to date me, but as a joke, like as a popular hot girl, would try and architect situations where me, like the chubby, unpopular kid with the sweater that said so many books, so little time, would like see her naked. And it was always just like tiny little instances, and then she would laugh at me, right? And I felt bad about myself. But the story is that the climax of this pattern was after I gave a speech that saved the drama program, our theater teacher gave me the privilege of selecting what our show would be the last quarter of senior year. She was like, honestly, there's a chance I wouldn't be employed in this position without that, petition and shit you did. So like, we've never done this before, but pick whatever you want to do, and you can pick any part you want. And I feel incredibly privileged to have had that in school. And yeah, like it's one of the highlights of my life, because I was like, I want to be Prospero in The Tempest. It's my favorite play, and it's the character I would most want to play in life. And she's like, it's probably beyond your ability at this age to grasp what Prospero is thinking in The Tempest.
As a teenage actor, yeah.
Like, you realize this is what William Shakespeare is writing at the end of his life as a reflection on life. Like,
yes.
Looking back at it. And I'm like, I think I can nail it. So I got to be Prospero. I got to be an 18-year-old Prospero in The Tempest. And on opening night, if you know Act 5, Prospero has a very important climactic monologue.
Yeah.
It was the choreography that Caliban has the people, like he's with what do you call, restraining some people a stage right. So I'm center stage, down stage, giving like a monologue that as my 18-year-old self, I think is the culmination of my career. Mm-hmm. And this girl knows I have to look stage right for the totality of it. So she completely naked stands in the wings, bends over, and fingers herself.
Oh!
For the totality of my monologue. And again, I want to point out, this is not like a dear hustler. This girl was mean to me. This was obviously like an act of aggression. This didn't mean that we were going to like hook up later. It was to fuck me up. And it did. And I completely biffed my monologue and like skipped the middle 80% of it and just like turned bright red and went to the end of it. And then went home very confused. And then tried to hit on this girl the next day only to find out, no, I was right. She doesn't like me. It was just a thing. It was just a weird thing.
Oh my God. Well, because before you got to the fingering business, I was like, oh yeah, people flash each other off stage, like on closing night, whatever. It's kind of funny, whatever. But that's like a shade too gray.
That
right,
is like something out of a John Hughes movie.
Yes.
This is this is what I realized when you guys had so many theater people on that I'm like, all that stuff wasn't normal. I just realized this in the last couple years. Yeah.
It definitely wasn't. I mean, I don't think my repression was normal.
Yeah.
And remains normal. I think you guys might have the better end of the stick in that you're just like cooler about sex.
Yeah, but if you're repressing yourself like I was, then you missed out on the party.
But that's what I'm saying, Sarah. It's not really a party. It's like a wash of confusion, and you can't tell when to feel guilty and when to feel excited. It's not that much of a party. Like, you didn't miss much. It's just this weird thing.
Yeah, no, it's rehearsal for the real life dating and relationship world.
Maybe I've been lucky, but my real life adult dating has been nothing like
You mean to tell me you've never just had a woman just start fingering herself right out of the gate on the first date?
I have yet as an adult to be asked to avert my eyes while I finger someone because that would make it cheating. Let's just say that.
Yeah, nothing that happened was normal.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Not even counting the storm drain. No, that reminds me of if people have listened to Teresa Lee's podcast, You Can Tell Me Anything. If they heard my episode, they will have heard this story, so I'll keep it short. But it is true, and I haven't said it on Small Beans. I was also at a dinner theater, cast in a dinner theater show in high school in junior year that involved wearing brown face every night.
Oh, no.
And there was a very sexually advanced young woman in the cast who, let's just say, like, ushered me through a lot of the milestones of like sexuality,
sure,
including in between scenes off stage and stuff like that, and including making out to the point where she would go on stage with brown face smears on her face that are obviously from my brown face, which is its own problem. I shouldn't have been doing that anyway.
Yeah, this is like a bingo of problematic behaviors.
Yeah. I'll never forget her backstage, because the like stunt cast celebrity person in it was a guy who had played Don Quixote on Broadway, and he was like 85 years old, and he was a really great actor, and he was like stooping to do this little dinner theater play because he was advanced in years and retired and shit. So it was this lady having like taking my hands and putting them into her top and being like, it's okay, like, feel my boobs, I want you to. Well, this 85-year-old man watched us waiting for his cue.
Boy.
And then when she had to go on and left, he just leaned forward and was like, I know you're young, but just gotta let you know, like, this is trouble. You don't want to do this.
Wow.
And that night...
What a sage.
That 17-year-old girl went home with two 34-year-old men. And I remember because she made a point of saying, like, they're double my age. So it's like quadruple my age if you put them together. And I was like, that old Don Quixote man was right. This is trouble.
Oh, my God. I will pray for her.
Oh, yeah. I hope
remember...
she's doing all right. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope she's doing all right. I do remember, like, because I was a little behind my friends because of my own weird repression. And then, like, hearing them tell stories, not like that, but similar, like, sex stories, and be like, oh, we're doing that now. Okay, I should probably get on that then. And making very, like, calculated decisions of, like, okay, well, this is a time everyone's doing it.
Giving a hand job was the new iPhone 9. You're like, oh, everyone has the new one. I
did make a pact with that with one of my friends before we went to a party. When we were like, I think this was like early freshman year of high school. So I was still basically friends with all my middle school friends. And it was basically a middle school party. And we like agreed that when we got there, they're like, look, if there's like alcohol going around, we're going to drink. If there's marijuana going around, we're going to smoke. By the way, I would then not go on to drink alcohol for 3 full years after this and not even smoke marijuana for another 5, I think. But we were like, yeah, we're just going to go and like whatever happens, we're just going to go for it. Like we're going to be with it. Girl, not a goddamn fucking thing happened. We did not get into anything. At one point, one of our guy friends was really drunk and was kind of on top of her. Well, not literally on top of her, but like arm around her, quote unquote, on top of. And literally she looked at me and I looked at her and we both kind of were like, well, look, we agreed that we would just like go for it. Like whatever happened, happened. I mean, that was like the extent of it. But I just remember like making a choice like, okay, like no matter what happens, if I get like a water bottle full of room temperature vodka, I'm going to drink it.
Oh, no, don't do that.
And it didn't happen because I'm sure everyone could sniff it out. They're like, she's not actually a 14-year-old insane person.
That's an interesting aspect of teenagerhood is that all the people that I thought were the coolest kids that I was actually in competition with or trying to be like, I would be legitimately concerned for now and like hope they're okay. Like you made me remember this girl who got eventually suspended or expelled because she would come into first period chemistry class and drink vodka out of a water bottle every day. And the teacher eventually was like, look, I know that like they say you can't smell it or whatever, but I know, right? Like, you know what's going on. There has to be discipline brought in. And I was like, that kid's so cool. And now as an adult, I'm like, I hope that kid's okay. It really flips on you.
This happened to my friend, but this guy sat behind her in like English class or whatever. And he tapped her and was like, hey, guess what I had for breakfast this morning? And she was like, what? And he said, 3 glasses of red wine, and then like went back to reading Portrait of Dorian Gray or whatever.
Wow, that's not cool.
I do think of that kid, but I also do think the image of sitting down as a teenager at like 6 a.m. and just drinking glasses of wine.
Red wine at 6 a.m.
He didn't enjoy it. He just saw that.
I better chug this. It's 50 degrees and the bus is coming.
Hey, and then going to English class to talk about like, I don't know, the Harlem Renaissance. Like, I don't know. It's kind of a fun image.
Yeah, he clearly got a romantic idea in his head from a Woody Allen movie.
Definitely.
And was like, she's 16 in this movie, so.
Well, it's like being in the club of knowing what something's like. Because I definitely remember that feeling. I remember being a kid just at the beginning of teenagerhood and literally thinking the conscious thought, I'll die or something first. Like I can't conceive that I will ever have had sex. And yet it's almost inevitable statistically if I live long enough that I'll eventually have sex. And I'm like, I can't even comprehend what that means. I remember thinking wrap my head around that.
Yeah. I remember, this is so weird. I don't know if I talked about this, but this is truly cringy. I remember it was 7th grade and people had just started making out, and there was this one couple who would go to this corner between 2 buildings and make out, and we would all as a class go watch them make out. And I remember,
were they like, come on, everyone, we're going to make out?
Yeah, there was like, oh, they're going to make out at this time. Let's all go watch. And then they would like swap gum, and like it was a magic trick.
They were trying to spiff up the show. They're like, it drags a little in Act 2. Can you like tie a cherry stem or anything? Yeah.
Yeah, it was that 7th grade time where no one knew how to escalate making out, so we all got bored. And
Wow.
That's crazy to me, though, that I don't think your average teen could perform with that many people watching. Like, that does take a special kind of egomaniac to be like, that's right, everyone watch.
Oh,
I'm king of the school.
I don't know who's weirder, all of us who went to watch it or the people who told us to
No,
come.
definitely the people who told you to go.
Yeah.
Definitely the people making out. Definitely.
Yeah, I guess, you're how old in 7th grade? Like 13? You're going to go watch that.
Yeah, of course.
And people were like taking notes too, like, oh, you do use tongue. That's not a rumor.
Jesus.
Jesus.
Jared, the guy from the bus,
Right.
the following year, when we were alone backstage one time, licked my eyeball and let me lick his eyeball. Is that sexual?
Well,
Just
only
wondering.
because you admitted that you masturbated to him. Yes, it is sexual now.
Yeah, please
Okay.
reply in the comments. Is that sexual?
That's really why I've come here today. It haunts me. Was that a sexual encounter? I'm not sure.
I have questions. An open eyeball or like eyelid?
Yeah, he also had used an empty pixie sticks tube to snort a line of ants.
Oh boy.
And said, like, I bet this is what cocaine is like. So this is the level at which
He's
our
right.
brains are
He's
functioning.
absolutely right.
And,
I once dared my friend to snort a line of salt, so I think that's similar.
Did they do it?
Yeah, they did
Yeah?
it.
Oh,
They
boy.
were not happy about it, and I don't know
Like
why
if-
they did it. I didn't offer them money. I just said, do this, and they did it.
No reward offered. Yeah.
No reward. They were in a lot of pain.
I don't know. I don't know if I'm like reassembling the memory, but I feel like the reason I picked him in that bus chat was because
He had
a
hot eyeballs?
history. He had a he had a history of being a kid who thought it was cool to just try weird shit, or like go far, because he was the kid who would eat bugs or like try weird shit like that.
Right.
And he definitely, I remember he instigated this instance. We were backstage and he was like, "I'm bored.
Lick my eyeball?
You want to lick my eye? I think you could. I don't think it's dangerous." And I was like, "Yeah, all right." And so obviously, because of the blink reflex, no, it's like using your your finger and your thumb to hold your eyelid open, and you look to the side, and
Yeah,
you
I
let
can-
someone
You like,
touch
that
your
was too
eyeball
easy
with
for
your
me
tongue.
to picture that.
yeah, you like clockwork
Yeah.
oranged it.
Yeah.
And we ended up doing back and forth to each other to like ascertain. He's like, "It feels weird, right?" And I was like, "I don't know. Do it to me." And I'm like, "Yep, confirmed. It feels
So I would
weird."
not say that's sexual per se. That was more of an experiment. But there could have
Yeah.
been sexual tension there. We weren't there to see it.
Yeah, I think.
it's hard.
Yeah,
have
I
to go
think
back
it's
in time.
the amount of tension is what makes it sexual or
Yeah.
not.
Then none, because there was none. It was like, "Hey, this feels weird. You want to feel it?" Yeah, that does feel weird. That was
Right,
really
it's like getting-
the beginning and end of it.
Yeah, I feel like it's getting shocked almost. Like
Yeah.
when people have those pens and everyone's like, that's
Oh,
awful,
yeah.
you try.
Yeah, sour milk.
I had a friend, my roommate freshman year at college had a friend, an older friend who was a cop, and he had his taser on him, and he said, "Tase me," and he said, "No," and he said, "Tase me," and he said, "I can't, it'll get me fired, it's not," and he's like, tase me, I want to feel it," and he's tased him, and he arched his back so hard that his head broke through the wall. And the cop was literally like, "This is going to be a lot of trouble for me. I shouldn't have done that." Like, so I don't know. There's a limit to like testing the limits of the body, but
Wow, I think we've learned a lot today.
We really have.
that was my pal, not me. But I witnessed it. It was awesome.
Yeah, no, I always wonder if I was in a situation with a taser. I'm curious about it enough.
We would be dead. Are you kidding me? We would tase each other like forever.
That is true.
Oh yeah.
would die.
Someone in college made the mistake of giving me real mace as prop mace
Oh, no.
for a show.
Shit.
And I absolutely sprayed it away from anyone in the corner thinking I just wanted to see what real mace looked like. And it absolutely went into the vents and forced them to clear the building because everyone in the building had like burning eyes and shit. You can't just spray mace around. There's
no, definitely not.
It is a
no
gas.
safe way.
So yeah, don't do that. I've definitely done a lot of stupid stuff. Just like I had a hole in my chin because I thought skateboard basketball was a good idea.
Yeah.
I put a permanent hole in another kid's lip because I did the quote unquote classic bit where you pull their seat out when they're gonna sit down. And they had a pencil in their mouth and it punched a hole through their lip. And they still have a hole there to this day.
I was told by a teacher at a very, very young age not to do that because you could paralyze a person if they land like on their spine. So
it's a terrible prank.
Yeah.
Don't pull someone's seat out as they sit.
Especially not on those hard floors. Holy shit. School floors are like insane.
Well, we used to tabletop people all the time, which is basically
Stone Cold Steve Austin. What the fuck does that mean?
We're not hitting anyone with the tabletop, but what you would do is you would like pretend to tie your shoe and then someone else would so you were hunched over and someone else would walk another person so they would flip over you.
Okay.
Oh my God.
And that was a big epidemic at school until someone broke their clavicle.
Oh my God.
It always ends in tears, you guys. Mid-college, Abe and I both were part of a group that had a pattern or like a tradition of at parties when you were drinking a beer out of a glass bottle to hit the bottom so that it hit your teeth. Until someone split half of their front right tooth off and we're like, we can't do that anymore. But in retrospect, what did we think was going to happen? What do you think the end result
truly,
of this
that's
is?
only to hurt a person. I thought you were talking about when you tap the top of a glass bottle and it fizzes up because that's always funny.
Yeah.
No, that was our joke, was all of our college friends were doing that. And we thought it was a funny commentary on that bit to hit you in the teeth with your fucking glass bottle.
It is funny. But yeah, Swaim, thanks so much for coming on and elaborating on your wonderful stories.
Theater kids
and
are
your
weird.
Vulnerability.
I don't do this stuff anymore. That's all I feel the need to say. This is the past, you guys.
You're
past.
forgiven. You're forgiven.
Thank you.
I think it's an important caveat for all these podcasts that we've all since grown.
Definitely.
From the beginning to the end.
Swords especially.
Jesus.
Yes. My God. But yeah, is there anything you want to tell the people? Anything going on you want to plug?
I've been saying it occasionally in case Small Beans people don't know and want to know. I work at IGN.com now, so you can find videos of me there. But all this other stuff is still my number one priority, so...
Great.
And you can find us on all the social medias at Rough Stuff Pod, of course here on Small Beans and wherever you get your podcasts. I'm on Twitter at Bridgett Tweets and on Instagram at Bridgett-Greenberg.
And I'm on Twitter at SK_Griffith. And coming soon, Bridget and I will be hosting another podcast. That's all I'm going to say for this episode. If you want to find out more, you can go to the Small Beans Patreon and learn more.
Yeah, so that's the other thing I want to broadcast is just because I took a day job at IGN, one of the conditions of taking it was I was like, I'm not going to give up Small Beans though. So if anyone's wondering, no, Small Beans is continuing.
Yay.
As long as you patronize it, so you should do that. And I found out it's good strategy for us to say this out loud as often as possible. If you can't afford to or don't wish to patronize us at this time, it really does concretely help to go to iTunes and give us a review on iTunes. So do that too.
But only if it's positive, 5 stars only. If you have anything else, fuck off.
So, yeah.
What she said.
You heard it. Rate, review, Small Beans on iTunes, and keep an eye on that Patreon feed. Thanks so much to Swaim.
Thank you.
All right, and we're out. Bye.